We're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. So if you want to turn there in your Bible today, if you need a Bible, there should be one in a row there for you, a little blue Bible, and the page number for today is 528. So if you're new to the Bible or you're still reading down the Navigator, you turn to page 528, and that'll help you find the text that we're going to be reading today. So, God's word is amazing. As I was reading this text this morning, or this, not this morning, I did read this morning, but I was reading this week, studying this, trying to prepare for this message. I was thinking through some events that have happened in world history, and most modern historians would trace the beginning of World War I back to one key event, okay? And that key event was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, okay? In the Austro-Hungarian area. And it was a hostile time, it was a tense time of Bosnia, Serbia, and the Hungary area. And he had decided he was traveling and he was going to go visit some wounded in the hospital, right? So he's on his way. He had made this decision to deter off the original plan for the day. And so he communicates to one of the generals, hey, I'm just going to go visit the wounded in the hospital. So if you could let my driver know, detail, know, so that I can be properly protected. And we can make a good path to get there. But the general, Patoric, failed to inform the driver. Okay? General Patoric failed to inform the driver, and so they end up taking a wrong turn. And what ends up happening is they had multiple assassinated, people who were trying to take out Archduke Ferdinand, and one of them, had a gun and he was able to shoot the Archduke and his wife, and they both died just a few moments later. And so most historians would say that this assassination attempt that was executed, it wasn't even executed super well. It should have failed. But because this one general forgot to inform the driver, it ended up assassinating this Archduke Ferdinand. And as a result of that, we have estimated that probably about 19 million people have died as a result of World War I. And then 20 years later, because of the events that happened in World War I, World War II breaks out just 20 years later. They did that, right? Just 20 years later, then we have approximately 78 million people that died. So over one foolish decision that a general who didn't communicate, right, to the driver, we have potentially approximately 97 million people lose their lives over one city. One foolish choice could know the loss. And so, we need daily, moment by moment, wisdom. This community is desperate need to make wise choices every second. So there's a big idea that I think Colette, the writer of Ecclesiastes, our speaker, what he wants us to understand, this is the big idea I think he wants to take home today, that a little folly ruins a lot of wisdom. Just a little bit. You put a little folly into the wisdom, and it can ruin everything. So no matter how much wisdom's in the room, how much wisdom's in the country, how much wisdom's in the community, just a little folly can ruin it all. One little foolish choice can have cataclysmic events and have an effect. I think that's what he wants us to get here today. So a couple of things before we dive back into verse 10 here, chapter 10, verses 1 through 7, is remember that we have the two authors of Ecclesiastes, with the narrator and the professor, right? So the narrator is probably a student of the professor, He's the one he's kind of opened the book and closes the book. And he's compiled all this data from his professor. What his professor, his technique, his strategy, what he's been doing to try to help his students understand the truths of this book, of this world, is that he'll adopt both the secular scientific mindset and then a biblical mindset. And he's trying to test and see how these kind of work together sometimes and how they oppose each other. And so, as some commentators have said, it's like we're living in the reality of he's trying to process through the world of the biblical idea of the ideal world. So it's like Genesis 1 and 2, right? God creates the world good, everything's set up, should be functioning properly. But then Genesis 3 happens. So the fall, sin comes into the world, and now everything is broken. It's not as it should be. So the Ecclesiastes is living in that tension. That it recognizes there's an ideal world that God's set up that should be good and everything should be flourishing. But sin is also now available. The world is broken and things are not as it should be. And so that's what he's been doing the whole book. And so if you adopt his sinful mindset, that's the secular, non-theistic, God doesn't really exist. We're just trying to live life like empirically, scientifically, just as if faith doesn't even matter, that God doesn't even matter. We're just kind of live a secular worldview. He said that won't work. But he's also recognizing he comes over here and he says, okay, these promises and these things of God that are supposed to work, they don't always work either. He's living in this tension, right? That's what he's been exploring with us. And so if you don't understand that, the book can be confusing, right? It's a book in the Bible. He'll say things that kind of sometimes go and rub up against a traditional religious view of the world. You're like, why is he doing that? It's because he's trying to kind of navigate between these two mindsets, right? Okay? So he's going to do that again today. That's it. Every time, almost, that we read this book. And so I'm going to look at this text from two angles. I'm going to look at the delicate disposition of verses 1 through 4, and then I'm going to look at disordered success in verses 5 through 7. Delicate disposition, verses 1 through 4, and then disordered success in verses 5 through 7. Okay, so let's look at the delicate disposition of verses 1 through 4. That what he does here is he gives us multiple examples of folly, of foolish behavior, foolish thinking. All right, so let me read verses 1 through 4 for us. You can read along. Here's what he says. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Sorry, you bunch of people. Even when the fool walks on the road, he lacks sense. And he says to everyone that he is a fool. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place. For calmness will lay great offense to rest. So this is set in a traditional, proverbial, literary devices here, right? It's just a bunch of seemingly random statements, right? These axioms, these proverbs, these truths that are coming in. But you can hopefully see, just from me reading it, that there's some common themes, right? That he's obviously talking about foolishness and wisdom, the fool and the wise, right? And so he's picking up where he left off in verses 13 through 16 in chapter 9. That he sees that wisdom should be what's best for the world, right? It should be what's best for a community, best for a city, best for a family. But it doesn't always work out that way. And so he's frustrated that wisdom is not given its high place, that it's not always working. And so he subverts wisdom, he kind of undermines it, and it says, immediately in verse 1. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. That shouldn't be right. Wisdom and honor should outweigh folly. That's the way God set up the world. When you read the book of Proverbs, right, there's as I read the commentators, as I read the people who are much smarter about the Bible than I am, and they say, you read Proverbs, it has this kind of what they call retribution theology in it, right? Which means that, like, I live a wise life, I preach a righteous life, I fear the Lord, and things should generally go well for me. And so it's like you're living in Genesis 1 and 2. Let God set up the world good. You do what he says. You live wisely. You live righteously. And things should generally go well for you. But what Colette's saying is wisdom's delicate. You put a little folly in there, and it ruins the whole bottle of perfume. It makes it stink. Right? That word outweighs wisdom. One commentator, I read this week, I thought this was really helpful. He said, you can translate his word to mean precious. So there's a sense where what the author is saying, Colette is saying, what the professor is telling us is, a little folly, you become more precious in wisdom for. You think about something precious. What is it? It's something you treasure. I mean, something you put on your mantle. Something that you keep in a special place. You hide it in your heart. And he said that wisdom can become less precious to us, and folly becomes more precious. But it sticks up everything. Right? So perfume would have been very expensive in that. That would have been a treasure. Right? You think about the perfume that was brought to Jesus, right, and put on his feet. His disciples are upset. And I was reading that this week when I was doing my Manathon, right? Jesus is being prepared for his death. His disciples are like, why are you using this perfume on your feet? Right? She was using something precious to her to bless her Savior. So imagine the fly they've been making that holy perfume stick. That's what he's trying to put to us here. So if you're filling out your gathering down here, that's your little note here that, well, your first thing that I have for you is your folly becomes more precious in wisdom. It is exponentially dangerous. When folly becomes more precious than wisdom, it is exponentially dangerous. It happens all the time. The commentator Craig Bartholomew wrote this. He says, one might have expected Colette, that is the professor, to use his proverb to ward against even a little folly. But he doesn't do that. He focuses on the vulnerability of wisdom. Wisdom is exceedingly vulnerable to folly. It's delicate. Like any precious thing, you should truly care. You should really treasure wisdom and take care of them, because a little folly will a lot. Now, when we get into verses 2 through 4, this sounds more like traditional, biblical, religious wisdom. So he kind of switches, right? He starts off kind of saying, I'm tired. He just got finished talking about that wise poor man in chapter 9, right? That should have been elevated to a high place in his being. It wasn't. He's commenting on that. That's what he's doing in verse 1. But now he kind of switches gears. That's where he's like taking a secular hat off, with his religious hat back. He does this and he throws us off. So he says, a wise man, then, his heart inclined him to the right. Now the right would have been a symbol of strength. It would have been a symbol of something sturdy. Even today, most people are right-handed, right? I love baseball. My dad was a big pitcher. He was a baseball guy, right? My fan pitchers rare, right? Most people are right-handed pitchers. Most people are right-handed batters, right? You got left, and it's like you're in another way, right? So the wise man is like a man he's strong, he's sturdy, but a fool is what? Right? This is not a political comment, right? So be careful. Don't inject your modern worldview into the Bible. It's the same right kind of symbolizes this strength, your strong arm, your left arm, where bigger people are. One of the words of Jesus was that they don't even know their right from their left. Like that's the way of the fool. You know, he points out something again in verse 3 where it says, even the fool when he walks on the road, he lacks sense, and everyone knows he's a fool. Eventually, like what he's trying to say is, you can try to hide your folly and try to hide that you're a fool, but it's pretty obvious to the rest of us. It comes out. People try to disguise their foolishness. They try to disguise their folly, maybe with eloquent words, or flashy personality, or eloquent clothes, or they try to look sharp or look good. But you spend enough time with them in that character is a fool. Right? It's probably most brides in the room, your husbands, right? Like, he was flashy at the beginning, but now look at the guy and he's a fool. Right? It becomes very obvious to us when we see folly. Now, the heart, this is an important thing here, the heart in the Bible is not what most of us think today. It's not like purely or just merely emotions. The heart represented the soul in the Bible. That is where your thoughts are and your feelings. It's your inward being. It's your disposition. Which is why he said this is in delicate disposition. Right? That the heart is the core of a person. And so if you think that you can hide your folly, it's in your heart. It's in your inward being. You can't hide it. It'll eventually lay sort of out. Because it's in you. Now, in verse 4, I think what he's trying to do for us here is he says that the anger of a ruler rises in that you do not leave your place. This is too bitter to show this. Right? For calmness will the rape offenses to us. You'll find it all over the fathers. Hey, be calm. If somebody gets all hot, heated, you remain calm, and you'll eventually settle them down. Because if you've been a parent, or we've got some school teachers in right? Like, you've seen this in your classroom, right? They get all hot, bothered, they're all over the place, and if you get all hot, bothered, in the place, what's going to happen? You just got to escalate the situation, right? But if you remain calm, hey, what's going on? Talk to me. Use your words, right? You can help settle them down, right? As you are settled, yeah. Okay? These are proverbs, right? These are not perfect strategies, but this is generally true, right? So the calm would represent the wise. The anger would represent the fool. Now, but notice the anger is in the ruler. It's in the boss. It's the one over you. And so it's tempting when I have an angry boss, an angry leader. He's saying your temptation, it was that rises against you. What do you want to do? Leave. Want to get away from that person. You are a fool. I don't want to be under your leadership anymore. But you can already see here, that's not going to help you. That's not going to help the company. That's not going to help society. You have to remain calm. Let's see if you could settle the leader down, settle the boss down, and you could help them grow to not be a fool. I mean, I pastored a lot of military back in Ohio. And this way they communicate to me a lot is that they had commanding officers who were younger than them, over them, right? You have a young person, a lot of power, and you got all these like enlisted men who've been doing the job for 15, 20 years, and this young lieutenant comes in, and he's trying to make a name for himself, and he starts bashing his rank around him. And they're like, this guy is a fool. The wise would come in and listen to their enlisted men, listen to the sergeants, listen to, hey, what's working, what's not working, right? So that under sergeants have to keep the young lieutenant. He's young. Let's give him some something, work with him, right? Let's see if they can teach him listen. But they can't just quit the military, right? Like, well, I got a bad lieutenant, so now, and then stick it up, cover up with that. This is really they show. And we see this all across the Bible. We see Joseph dealing with the fool, Pharaoh, right? And then another Pharaoh comes along and completely fits Joseph. We see David dealing with Saul, right? Saul starts off king, first king in Israel, and he goes insane. And David has to be on the run, hiding in caves from his own king. We see Daniel dealing with Nebuchadnezzar, acting like a fool. Got so foolish and insane that he thought it was a cow. Daniel has to deal with this guy. And we see Jesus himself dealing with Judas. The ultimate fallen, the ultimate fool, where a little ointment stinks up everything. You see that piece across the lives of the never ever fail the throne. It's across the Bible, it's in our own lives. Do we see Colette's, like, what he's recognizing here is absolutely true? Now, before we become so quick and judgmental to think it's an out there problem and not an in here problem, just in your notes here, we need to keep this in mind that wisdom takes time, but folly destroys quickly. Wisdom takes time, folly destroys quickly. And in a cultural moment of immediacy, where everything's quick, social media, news gets out fast, everybody wants you to make a decision now. Wisdom takes time. Gotta gather information, to data, pray, seek the Lord before I seek the news. Seek the Lord in the news. Seek the Lord after the news. Because where does wisdom come from? It comes from love, not from the law. And so before we're quick to just look out, let's look in and say, am I seeking the Lord for his wisdom? Am I stopping and praying and say, help me to seek who me? How you use this is chaotic. I have this neighbor I love, and this neighbor I love, and one is in the left, and one is in the right, and I want to love them both. I don't know how to do that. We need God's wisdom. The commentator Daniel Trier says this. He says, trying to educate a fool is basically useless. So if the elite are foolish, the rest of the people are really in trouble. Right? And the people at the top, they got a hold of power and all the influence. If they're fathers, we're all built from. So what do we need to be doing? We need to be praying for those people. We need to be calm with those people. We need to be a source of wisdom for them. And I don't have a relationship with the president. I don't have any relationship with our state senators. But I could have a relationship with people in my sphere of influence. So I could be calm, patient, and wise with that. And they're going to hope this so I can have a trickle-on effect. Hey? So this is the delicacy of our disposition. We need to watch our hearts. Are they inclined to the right, to believe this, or are they inclined to the left, the way of folly, the way of weakness? This is strength. It's also patient, kind, gracious, deep, merciful. It's the wisdom of Christ. There's no world. There's a world fast, violent, outrageous, and ignorant.
To reject that was embrace the ism of Christ.
Oh, let's continue on here. He continues on in what we call disordered success. Disordered success. So verses 5 through 7, he says, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as it were an arrow proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich set in a low place. I have seen slaves on horses and princes walk on the ground like slaves. Now be careful here, right? I have to be careful. I read some of these statements and I think of the Atlantic slave trade, which has affected some of my personal heritage. And I'm like, why are you so dirty about slaves? Right? Slow down. Let's not interject our cultural moment onto the moment of the Bible. It's not using this in the language the same way we do, right? So we want to be careful. We want to be wise. All right? Slow down and say, let's try to understand what the author Colette's trying to say. He's continuing the idea here from verse 4. So this is less about, these dynamics we think about today, and it's more like in the ancient world, someone who was in a high place, you expected to be wise. You expected them to be, and if they were wise, if you read the book of Proverbs, you will see that this is what's called retribution theology, that the wise, they expected to be successful. They expected them to be rich. They expected them to ride on horses. And so that everybody who saw them come by, you'd see the wise king come by, and you'd be like, oh man, I am so glad that guy's our leader. He is wise. He is patient. He's trying to help our whole country flourish. He's living the way God intended. That was with the image that you had. You expected him to be rich, but you recognize the disorder he's recognizing here. And he's really bothered by this because he opens up saying there is an evil that I've seen under the sun. There's an evil here, a wicked, a disorder, a chaos, a thing that is not the way it's supposed to be. And that a fool is given a high position. Now, whether you are a left or a right-wing person in the room, you could feel that either which way you go. Because that person on the opposing party gets in the office, oh, here goes this fool. He's been given a high position. He's going to run our country. We all feel this. It's just amazing. He is recognizing a reality we all experience every 4 years. Sometimes every 2 years, right? The ruler is the source of the problem, though. It's proceeding from the ruler that someone's over, and then they're appointing other fools to be over more, right? It's like, okay, I'm over, and I'm a fool, and I'm appointing more fools to continue the foolishness. And he's really bothered by this. That the wise should have been rich, the prince should have been the wise, right? So the world is in chaos, it's not functioning. This is a recognition of the reality of Genesis 1 through 3. Genesis 1 through 2, God creates the world good, it's perfect. Then our parents screwed up, our first parents, rich sinners in the world, and now chaos and confusion is running it down. Chaos and confusion was there, actually, in Genesis 1, verse 2. Right? Earth's not formless and void. That's a way of saying in Hebrew it's not habitable, it's in chaos. And so God orders the world. Right? He makes it habitable for a place for humans and plants and animals to flourish. And then when sin comes back to the world, it screws it all up. And then God's been on this reordering project since. And so why does God give leaders to the world? This is in your notes here. Okay, so you're taking notes. Leaders are given to grow wisdom and not spread folly. That's why God gives leaders to communities. That's why God appoints leaders to exist in the world. They're meant to advance, they're meant to grow wisdom, not to advance folly, not to spread folly. That's what Colette is recognizing. That's not the function of a leader. That is display. That is an evil, he says. It should not be that way. Leaders are given to grow wisdom, to spread wisdom, God's wisdom throughout the world, not folly. And we've lived in this tension that there's this thing that we all recognize. If you've lived in this world, this country long enough, that I call it the just society myth. Right? Now what we're taught is, be a good person, be a person with moral character and high integrity, things are going to go well for you. Is that what happens? No. That's called the just society myth. You know how I know it's a myth? The most good, high integrity, high moral character person to ever walk this earth was murdered by a bunch of fools. It ultimately will work out because Jesus was raised from the dead. He promises we get kingdom of heaven because but let's not fool ourselves. This world is run by fools. Do not expect that just because you're a one person, a high integrity person, a good person, do you have confusion and go up for you? You don't notice that. It didn't happen for Christ. It's not going to happen for you. Most people who succeed in this world have gotten there by harm, manipulation, corruption. I was talking to a friend of mine this week back east, and we're talking about the political climate. And I said, hey, look, man, I just don't trust any of these politicians. No. Call me a skeptic. I'm a Gen Xer, 1980s kid. I mean, my mom was probably the most skeptical person on face of the earth. She told me not to trust anybody. And it's hard. You know, not going to grow and not be so distrusting and suspicious of everybody, but like, oh, no, I don't trust nobody. Like, I'll go to a rich white suburb, I'll lock my car, and I don't trust it. And I'll go to the hood, right? Lock my car, I don't trust it. I don't trust none of you. You won't steal my stuff. And part, I'm not saying all of that's good, but part of that is I'm recognizing deep down in my soul that the world is not as it should. There are sinners and black, white, rich, poor, sins everywhere. The commentator, Craig Bartholomew, once again, he says, if folly is reigned, then the wisdom of verse 4 will not work. Go back to read verse 4, right? It's anger can be dealt with by the calmness of the thighs. That's how it should work. But verse 5, there's an evil heart in the son. There's all these folly is reigning. You see the tension he's living in. Even when he adopts good, wise views, traditional and religious views, he still says, like, it doesn't always work. Because the world's broken. Sin is in it. And he has to account for that. Let's get into your notes. Our belief in a just society is a heavenly artifact. So it's good that you have that just society myth in your heart. It's good. It's a heavenly artifact. And what it teaches us is that we belong or we believe that something better is out. We long for that. We long for more. Our belief in just society is a heavenly artifact. God put it there. That's the world as it should be. It communicates that we long for something better. So now let's finish up here. How do we roll with this? How do we put this together? How do we take the specs and go? Let's read. First, let's read this test. When you do the lens of Jesus, right? That Jesus is the ultimate wise leader. Right? He is the rich man. He is the Prince of Heaven. And what does this text tell us? Folly is set in the high place, and the rich sit in the low place. All foolish bears of Jesus' time were in the high places. Jesus was set in the low place. Because Jesus understood the way up is down. He knew the meek shall inherit the earth. So Jesus didn't ride on a horse, right, to his greatest moment in his life, did he? He not only walked, but he walked across. Wet, beat, broken. Why does he open it all up? For you and me. He takes the low position, taking what we deserve, that march to a violent death, to experience the full wrath of God for people like you. So if we're going to live out this test, we first need to remember what cost it. I don't want to go to this text and be like, oh, yeah, I know that. No, listen, Jesus, he's beautiful. He lives this perfectly. A couple of thoughts I could have already not going to set it down here. I was just asking myself, but I find myself out there is saying, what flies or what foolishness am I laying into the perfume of Jesus's? We're not letting the world kind of creep into my perfume. It's Jesus' wisdom is precious. It should outweigh the Father. But we let that little fly in and spins up of us. It ruins the wisdom from out of us. So stop and think this way. Where am I let that happen? Then be reminded you can't hide your falling. Right? If you're walking around, that's cool. You're not gonna be alive. You can't put on that show forever. What you have in your heart will come. And so are we hiding off wisdom? Are we hiding the treasure of Jesus' wisdom in your heart so that when those stressors come, that hard boss comes, when that hard spouse comes, when that difficult child comes, am I ready in the wisdom of Christ? Am I walking in this one section? Am I walking in this wisdom? Am I walking in this one? Is cause my North Star? Is what I look to every day, every second. So that's my ethic. That's how I live. That's what Jesus did at the height of his ministry. He's telling that's how I that cause. The days will make the way back up. As we do that kind of small money is what we talk about. Okay? Remember, we're set here being. Entitled this message, Delicate Wisdom. Is this, if I haven't communicated, I'm trying to communicate the weight here. Following just a little bit of what will ruin your life. It'll ruin a moment. And so we're a little scared. Good. Ye sober. Sober means seeing things as they really are. Live in the real world. Be good to. I know when anybody I came to and said, son, you are a fool. Keep this. And my dad was a fool himself. He just saw me heading down the same path. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I say, God, Dad, I see you're a fool now. Oh, look like you, so I'm going to eat this book. You sure can you the seriousness here? Eat this, eat Jesus' words, eat his wisdom. Be self. You still mess up. We'll even show you like that. That's good. Interesting. There's a little follow lose a lot in this. Here of us. Father, thank you. Let's get for your wisdom. Thank you for your grace. Help us to continue to walk in it. Help us to see how delicate wisdom is. How delicate every moment is. Tame our tongues. Hide wisdom in part so
So they spew out and walk in the world. That is a very, it's just